We are continuing this week with the discussion on the intellectual self care. I have been exploring the 5 dimensions of self care, and after an entire year of discussion, today we are looking at the final half of the intellectual self care. So let's look at what it means to take care of our intellectual self. The intellectual self, last week when we looked at the self care, is we looked at four different needs. Firstly, to look at learning as a lifelong process, and the needs of learning depend on the stage of the learning. So if I am in the safety stage, that's a different set of needs I have. If I am comfortable with whatever I'm learning, it's a different set of needs. Again, if I'm growing my learning, my entire experience of that subject or that topic, that's a different set of needs I have. And eventually, when I've gone through these 3 cycles, I have to look at what it is that I need to release before I'm ready to move on and renew and deepen my learning. So that was a needs cycle of learning as the first need of intellectual self care. So this is what we are looking at, the entire map of self care. And that's the intellectual self care which we are looking at. And this was a needs cycle for the learning process. And it's the same needs cycle that we looked at for emotional needs. It's a different way of looking at our emotional needs. And in this case, we are using the same needs cycle, but we are using it for understanding what we need to learn. And learning is a lifelong process. So our needs at each stage of the learning process change. And these were the 7 different intellectual self care topics that we looked at. The 5 stages of learning I have spoken of right now. And the next one was the role of imagination. And in this particular visual, I really love to share this visual because of how cute this boy is. What's the role of imagination in learning? When we are using our imagination to learn, that process of learning becomes easy. And most of the time, learning becomes tedious because no imagination is involved. So, just the simple act of involving the imagination in that process makes that learning process enjoyable and fun. So, that's a need. We all want to learn, we all need to learn. How can we make that learning process imaginative, creative, and fun? So, that was the second topic. And then we looked at intuition. Traditionally, intuition is being understood as something that is used by people in a spiritual sense, or now that we have a lot of energy workers, light workers, we are looking at intuition as a part of their work. And in this particular topic, what I want to highlight is that no, it's not just about specific people. The entire intellect needs to have access to intuition. So, no matter what we do in life, we need to have and we need to be able to trust our intuition. And when cops talk about gut instinct, doctors talk about gut instinct, scientists talk about gut instinct, it's all nothing but intuition. So, the problem we have, because the reason why intuition has got such a bad rep, is because we have felt it's not scientific enough. And the reason it's not scientific enough is because we are using our intuition in the wrong process. Who could be a better scientist than Einstein? And Einstein says the intuitive mind is a sacred gift and the rational mind a faithful servant. So when we are able to put the intuition first and use the information that we pick up from intuition to then look at it rationally, then that becomes a fantastic combination. And we are using our intuition in a wonderful way. So that was intuition, the third topic. And the fourth topic was silence. Our mind, especially in the modern world, is constantly thinking, constantly active. And when it is constantly active, there is no silence. And I'm not talking about physical silence, though physical silence does help that process of inner silence. What I'm looking at is inner silence, mental silence. Without mental silence, it's very difficult to access our intuition. So just taking that deep breath in and out, focusing on the breath in and out, just creating awareness of our own breath creates silence. And the best example, and there is a video that I talk about meditation with the experiment water and mud. When we have a water filled with mud and we keep constantly churning it, we're not able to see the depth of that water, what is lying underneath. And that's the same with our mind. If I'm constantly thinking thoughts, it is constantly churning. So I get caught up in the superficial layer of the mind. When that happens, I don't have access to my intuition. So if I want access to my intuition, the next corollary for that is I need to provide my mind some silence. And the best way of finding silence is to keep practicing. And the practice doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be deep, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to happen regularly, enough times so that the mind gets used to the process. Once the mind gets used to the process, then just starting it, even in an imperfect environment, one with chaos, one with noise, one with a lot of confusion happening around us, because we have done this enough times in good silence, external silence, the mind gets goes autopilot in that inner silence mode. And that is when we are able to take a nice deep breath in and out, calm the mind, and the mind, it is very clear to the mind at that point, okay, this is what I need to do now, this is what I need to access my own intuition. So all of that is possible when I'm able to provide my intellect with periodic times of silence. And that silence is a need of our intellect. The way we say the body needs food, the body needs a movement, the body needs sunlight, the intellect needs silence. And when we don't give it that silence, then it goes berserk, and we get overcrowded, we get overheated, our brain gets literally overheated. I'm not able to think clearly. So periodic bouts of silence is good. Now, if I'm not able to give an inner silence easily, that's when I can start going to places that give me external silence. Nature is a wonderful way, wonderful tool to provide us that silence. And in that external silence, I can then start finding my inner silence. Again, there is no guarantee that that's going to happen unless I make the effort to still my own thoughts by tuning in to the external silence. If I am in a place of external silence, perfect external silence, beautiful scenery, beautiful ambience, but I am constantly still obsessed with thinking about something, that external silence is not going to give me internal silence. So I need to make that attempt. I need to start practicing it. And it doesn't have to be very long periods, just a minute or two is often good enough to get us started. And once we are able to do this, we can then find inner silence anywhere. So that is the fourth topic that we had, silence, which is important for intellectual growth. Let's look at the fifth topic, and that is a reflection. So, what's the difference between silence and reflection? When I say reflection, so we have the beautiful example of water here. So if there is a sunrise that is happening in the horizon, and I have a water body there, that water body is going to very beautifully reflect the sun. And if I'm able to see the reflection of the sun in the water as well as the sun in the sky, that's like a double bonus. I'm able to enjoy both in beautiful measures. Similarly, when we are constantly thinking with our mind and we are introspecting with our intellect, this process of reflection is very important. This process of reflection is what allows us to crystallize our knowledge into wisdom, to crystallize our knowledge into insights. Without that, it is just knowledge. I can study any topic that I want, and then maybe I can prepare beautiful mind maps. I can create slideshows explaining that. If I don't take it the next step, which is a reflection, that still remains organized knowledge, structured knowledge. It is not insight. It is not wisdom. The wisdom part of it, and I read somewhere about education, is that if everything that I study, everything education, the real education, everything that I study is taken out of me, what remains is true education. So if I lose track of all the facts that I have painstakingly learnt, painstakingly organized in my mind, and I lose all of that at some point in time, what remains is my insights and wisdom. And these insights and wisdom, become part of my nature, become part of my character in such a way that sometimes I may not even be able to figure out what was the original source of this wisdom, because I may have taken three or four different topics or three or four different areas of knowledge, reflected on them, and then in my mind, in my inner landscape, the three or four of them combined together, and out came this beautiful insight, beautiful wisdom. And this is possible only when I take time to reflect. And again, if I need to reflect, I need to provide myself that inner space, that inner silence, and a willingness to reflect as well. So, when we look at reflection, so this is our practical knowledge. The difference between knowledge and reflection that leads to insights and wisdom is the way the person speaks. If the person is speaking from insights and wisdom, that will be very obvious in the way they talk. And they don't have to say much, just the way they present. You will know it's this, what they are saying is coming out of practical experience that's led to wisdom. It'll be very obvious, even to a small child. And the question then is there a right way of reflection? What do you all think? Is there a right way of reflection? See, I have gone through experiences, maybe some challenges, and I'm reflecting on it. And then I come to some conclusions, deep down conclusions. How do I know that this is a right way of reflection? And I put this in specifically because, in my experience, sometimes people think they are reflecting, but they are just judging. They are just judging either themselves or others or the situation itself. This is bad. This is not good. I shouldn't have done that. How stupid of me. That person is always so judgmental. So all of that is not reflection at all. Though they may have spent time in silence, though they may have spent time thinking about the whole process, if it ends up that one of these three things are happening, like we are feeling bad about somebody else, we are feeling bad about ourselves, or we are feeling bad about the situation, that's not reflection. That's not real wisdom. Wisdom is actually that which allows us to take difficult situations and come up with ideas and insights that help us to understand what's happening, or help us to, even if that's not a very big statement, something like lifestyle makes a very big difference, or somebody who has spent a long time at work and then they got laid off, even though they gave their entire life to all the waking hours to the organization, and they get laid off. And initially, that time spent reflecting is going to come up as criticism of self, of others, and anything else. And finally, they may come up with an insight which says, I spent so much time at work and it was not valued. The remaining time of my life, I'm going to do something that is meaningful to me. Now, that is a reflection, that's an insight, that is wisdom. And that wisdom is going to actually give me the energy, the motivation to push me through in whatever I want to do. And this reflection is very important for every challenge, every difficult time that we go through in life. That is when that reflection will be truly felt. And it does not have to be just for difficult times in life, it can be for simple situations as well. Children can come up with wonderful insights and wisdom, and we need to encourage that as well. That is the intellectual need that we have. That was the fifth one. And the sixth one is deepen your learning through teaching. How many of you love to teach? I love to teach. So this topic was interesting to me. But the question that many people have is, I don't think I can teach because I don't know enough about this particular topic. And guess what? If I want to know more about the topic, the best way is to teach. Even if I'm teaching a imaginary audience, just the process of teaching, organizing my thoughts so that that imaginary audience will understand it, will make that teaching useful to me in deepening my own learning. And we don't have to be experts. And to realize that whether I'm directly teaching or not, I'm constantly teaching. I'm teaching whether sometimes I'm teaching through my example of what are the right way, what are the things that we can do. And sometimes through my example, I'm teaching others what not to do. And I used to use this. I didn't know about all this, but as a young girl, when I was in school, I would be constantly thinking when I'm in a class, if a teacher was teaching something that was really very exciting for me, I would think about it, and then I would be influenced by that teacher. And I would think to myself, and you know how, as young kids, we used to come home and teach our imaginary audiences. I would copy that teacher, and as I grew older, I would be taking pointers. Oh, this is a good thing that we can do to teach. That's a very fantastic example. So we should be able to do that because it excited me. I assumed it would excite others as well. And when a particular teacher's class was so boring, I would tell myself, when I teach, I should remember not to teach like this person, or this topic maybe can be taught differently. So whether we are directly teaching or not, people observing us, people who are in contact with us, are constantly seeing us and learning from us uh, what to do or what not to do, either way. So, if that is the case, we might as well teach in a way that is beneficial to others. And Einstein says this very beautifully, and this quote remained with me for a very long time when I saw this. If you cannot explain it to a 6-year old, then you don't know it yourself. What can we do? So, when we use our jargons, when we use our big, big words, when we use our big concepts and we tell others, then we are not able to simplify it enough for a 6-year old. And as I was preparing for this, a very funny incident came to my mind. And at that time, I didn't know about this quote. It just came to my mind. When my son was, I think, around 4 or 5, occasionally, as all children do, he would get some infection, ear infection, or some flu, fever, cold, and it would be difficult. Most kids who are very active find it very difficult to go through that illness. So I used to come up with a story because he loved stories. So I used to make up a story, and then I reinforced it with every illness. Says I used to tell, inside you there are white blood cells. They are like the soldiers, and you would watch some cartoons, and I would take examples from that. When you get a flu, when you're not feeling well, all these germs have come and they are attacking you. And these white blood cells, they are like the police guys who are going to take and attack the germs and get rid of them. Would you like to make sure that the white blood cells win? Then you would say, yes, 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 I want them to win. And then I would say, no, two things you can do to first take this medicine because it's going to make the white blood cells really strong. And then you need to drink lots of water because then all the attacked germs are going to be washed away from you. And most important, you need to get lots of sleep because it's only when you're sleeping that the white blood cells get their power. That is the time that they are fighting the germs. So if you sleep more, they are going to win. And 4-year-old, 5-year-old, I don't think he remembers this story anymore, but I remember this story because when I started understanding and learning about immune system 2 decades later, I realized just how accurate this story was. I had made it up as a desperate young mother to get him to cooperate with me, but there was so much of truth in what I had said. So in that case, I think I passed Einstein's test of being able to explain to a 6-year-old in a language that he could understand. So think for yourself, whatever we are learning, are we able to distill it and make it understandable to somebody else? And Richard Feynman, another scientist, my son was the one who introduced me to him, is a great physicist. And what I liked about Feynman, I don't know anything about physics, was what he taught about a topic. So his technique for teaching was choose a concept to learn for yourself, then teach it to somebody else. If I'm struggling to teach it to somebody else, that process of teaching highlights to me all the areas where my own knowledge is incomplete. So I go back, continue my material, learn again, and then simplify my explanations, and then come back to, and so the circle continues. And I thought, this is brilliant. This is wonderful. So, no matter where we are, whatever we are in, not all of us may have a classroom where we can teach or an audience where we can share our knowledge. Imaginary audience is good enough for us to practice this technique to learn any new material. And the last topic for intellectual self care is nutrition for mental well being. We all know about nutrition for a healthy body. What is it that is a nutrition for our intellectual self? Anybody? So the nutrition for our own intellectual self is equally important for our intellect. It is because it affects our mental well-being. And this nutrition is all the input that we have from our senses. We may think it's not impacting us at all. We may think we have a filter, but everything that we take in is being absorbed by our intellect. And so the input is the input from our senses, something that is creating chaos in our mind, whether we are aware of it or not? Is it something that's scaring us, whether we are aware of it or not? Or is it something that is calming us, that is energizing us? So, looking at our input from all the senses is very important. And this input happens throughout the day. Throughout the day, something else happens. We keep thinking. The thoughts that we tell ourselves is also part of what constitutes our intellectual food, our mental diet. So, watch what the thoughts that we think. And most of us, because we are constantly thinking, we may not even be aware of the thoughts we are thinking, which is habitual. An occasional thought is not as crucial as the habitual thought. So, that silence, that reflection, that time out is going to give us the space to become aware of the constant thoughts, the thoughts that we think. Are we praising ourselves? Are we appreciating ourselves? Any effort that we do on our part? Or are we criticizing ourselves? Are we saying, okay, continue, do the next work? This is not good enough. Can you put in more effort next time? If we are talking like this, and most of us do that pretty often, then we need to stop, because that's part of our intellectual diet. And we need to look at how we can be kinder to ourselves, how we can practice that self love and acceptance that we have in this right in the center of the logo, map of self care logo. That self love and acceptance coming to us through our own thoughts forms part of our mental diet and forms part of our mental well being. So that's all I have for you with regards to intellectual self care. Next week, on Friday, we will be starting the last of these pizza slices, which is our spiritual self care. And for those of you who are in the Facebook group, it's a private Facebook group. I will be seeing you on Monday morning, Singapore, 11:30 a.m. So see you all then. Thank you for joining me. Bye bye. Namaste. Do subscribe and hit the bell button for more weekly content on self care. And if you want even more actionable content on self care, do join me in the Facebook group for weekly lives, discussions, and more tips.